Welcome to Stress Free Solutions with Sarah, where I discuss various ways to manage stress and share special stories of guest experts who have gone through some of the same stressors as all of you at home. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Airing this on National Stress Awareness Day was so important to me because it's National Stress Awareness Day, and I'm all about figuring out ways to solve our stress problems, right? Also, today is a special day because it would have been my father's 65th birthday. The reason why I needed to start these conversations about stress is that my father was the type of person who took care of everyone else but himself. Stress, unfortunately, contributed to him not eating well, decompressing in front of the TV daily, and not exercising. It's my goal to get my message out to the masses that if we create fun solutions and make sustainable behavioral changes, the world is our oyster. That brings me to you, Maya. She actually met my father, and he really thought she was just something special, great energy, and a positive influence in my life. So I'm just so thrilled that you are here on this first episode with me, and it means the world to me.
I'm so happy,
She is,
Sarah.
oh, thank you so much. Maya is a graduate of University of Boulder, Colorado, where she obtained her Master's of the Environment and currently works as a life cycle assessment specialist for Horizon Organic Milk. So I have to tell people this. A story about how we met was actually through our ex-significant others. The greatest gift that I ever had from that relationship, and I do say this a lot, it's important, guys, to say what you're grateful for because we are living in a world of craziness, and just honoring the positive moments is something special, and it's great to share with others. So with Maya, I am so thrilled that I had that relationship because I would have never met you. And you've become like a sister to me. And I've only known you 6 years. And just so excited for all of your adventures and everything you're doing right now. With that being said, I would love for you to share what inspired you to get into sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, I couldn't agree enough that the best thing to come from those unexpected circumstances was my friendship with you. So thanks again so much. So sustainability, I got this question a lot. Kind of how did I find myself falling into sustainability? And for me, it was really a long and winding journey, as it is for a lot of people. It really came out of this not even desire, but really this almost obligation to do something meaningful with my life. And I've felt that ever since I was a little kid. I grew up in a pretty well off town with a very comfortable family life and really was just so lucky to live with the privilege that I had. But looking around, I knew that not everybody has that. And I wanted to take those resources I had and take that privilege that I had and apply it to something that was bigger than me and really try to make my mark on the world. And my passions have gone in all sorts of directions. And social justice, my passions have gone in international development, which is what I studied after I left my town. I actually went to Canada for undergrad, where I studied international development, wanting to go and work for the UN, wanting to help people in developing nations deal with issues around food security and things like that. And ultimately, I started pivoting from a more people focused view to a more environmental view because I realized there's lots of people doing great work on the social side of things. But what I personally love and enjoy is being outside, is being in nature, and is the connection that I feel with the outdoors. And that's something that I cherish in my personal life. And I thought, why can't I bring that into my professional life as well?
Yeah,
Working
that's
with
something that I've always admired about you is you are able to take time out of your day and be like, "This is my designated run time." You always have made self-care and exercise a priority to your life.
And yeah, that balance definitely can get really difficult, especially in the times that we're living in now, where those lines between work and life and sleeping in your bed and working at your desk and either way are super blurred. And so I think that's why it's more important now than ever to make sure you're making those lines for yourself, but also make sure that what you're spending your time on is something that you care about and is something that's worth waking up in the morning to do. It makes it so that your self-care is recharging yourself for ultimately fulfilling that purpose. The reality is most of us spend our waking hours at our job or doing what we're paid to do and earning money to survive. And I've always thought, why can't my values align with what that job is? Why can't my interests align with what that job is? And why can't I have some fun while I do it? So that's really my sustainability journey and getting into there and finding this role that I have currently at the nexus of food and sustainability, which are these two things I'm so passionate about, has really felt like it's the culmination of this windy path that I've taken where I've tried out all sorts of things.
Yeah, and a few not a few months back, maybe this was a year ago, you were trying to figure out what was your next move. What was that aha moment where you're like, "Okay, I know exactly what parts I wanna currently be working in
Yeah,
sustainability?"
I wish there was that aha moment.
Mhm.
And it's funny looking back on it, you can kind of pinpoint something, but at the time, you're just like, oh my gosh, am I making the right decision? And what am I doing? But really, one of the biggest decisions for me was going back to school. So I have had a really long and windy life path. I went to undergrad in Canada. I ended up moving to Australia for a few years. I ended up then moving back to the States and lived in Chicago, where I was fortunate enough to meet you. And things were going great in Chicago, but I was working a local urban farm and workforce development training nonprofit and doing amazing work at a really small scale. So I just felt called to do something bigger. And I felt called to use my very type A kind of analytical personality, which you are all too familiar with, and apply that to the business world because I really started seeing that of all the different levers, of community work, of government work, of individual action, and of business, the business is the fastest moving, and companies are really the ones that were picking up the slack that was happening with inaction on the part of the government when it came to environmental policy and conservation and doing good work. So I knew I needed to upskill for that. And my really big kind of leap of faith was saying, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to give up everything that's familiar to me and my personal relationships I built in Chicago and try something new. So I made that pivot really with a pretty clear intention of going into the corporate world. Grad school was fantastic. I think having that clear vision really helped me to focus on what I wanted out of it. And when I came out, I wanted to stay here. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I love it here. I realized how much I love the mountains and the nature and trail running, to your point.
Yeah.
But there are only so many opportunities, especially working at that nexus of food and sustainability. So I got a fantastic job working in corporate sustainability consulting, doing a whole array of things. But my heart was always in food. And I always was trying to figure out how can I get on projects that get me closer to food and agriculture and farming and that side of the environmental kind of gamut of projects. And I thought I was pretty happy though. Figured I would keep on going with that job that I was in. And COVID hit and my workload, I wouldn't even say doubled, almost tripled. There were so many people in my company that were parents and had to figure out this new situation. And me at being at the time newly single, coming off a really difficult breakup, living on my own, I was there to show up and put my hand up and pick up that slack. But it meant that I was just getting worked to the ground on top of all of these emotional things going on as we all go through this global pandemic together. Um, but serendipitously, as I was hitting really what felt like my low point, I was contacted by a recruiter, and this job with Danone North America, which a lot of people know as Dannon, which is a food company, fell into my lap. And it was a role that was helping Horizon Organic Milk, which a lot of people are familiar with, the red carton milk.
Oh, yeah. We all
And
have it in our
delicious,
households
not all over.
or have had it.
And the role was helping Horizon Organic Milk fulfill a commitment to be carbon positive by 2020. So to basically
Wow.
wipe out all the carbon emission that are associated with milk production, which can be a really impactful industry. And I was like, this is the role. This is the nexus of food and sustainability. This is what I hadn't even realized. I was working kind of my whole
This is your
graduate
happy
career.
place.
Here I am, and I'm loving it, and I'm in my elements, and I'm challenged, and I feel like I'm struck a really good balance too between, you know, that work in life that I wasn't getting with my last role. But Sarah, stress can really be an addiction as well,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
so leaving that was being the hardest thing like that.
And I feel with stress, we keep a lot of it on the inside. And if we don't let it out in whatever capacity it is, whether it be running, I mean, there's only so many runs you can do. And especially like you said, during a pandemic, you're like, oh, now I have to really deal with what's going on with my emotions, right? And so whether that be, I've been to therapy, of course, there's that, but there's also our meditation practice that we could do. It could be as simple as breathing. Did you find that deep breathing helped you during times of uncertainty?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I actually made a little list for myself, which I wish I could look at. It's upstairs right next to my desk. And it says, today, did you dot, dot, dot. And it has a list of things. And one is, did you breathe deeply? Did
I
you get your heart
love.
rate up? Did you pet your cat mindfully? Because my cat is one of the loves of my life and a huge de stressor. Animals are such a de stressor. Did you interact with nature? Did you listen to music? And did you give yourself a compliment? I think that's the list.
Oh, that's so lovely. Yeah.
And
Oh,
I needed those reminders. I needed them because otherwise I would put my head down and I would just be an absolute workhorse. And I
but
tried my best to really fulfill that list. And I think breathing is just the easiest
breathing's
to start.
huge.
Yeah.
I do have to ask about the compliments. That when you first started it,
Oh my gosh.
first off, how did you get in the mindset to be like, hey, I'm going to start complimenting myself every day?
Honestly, how I got into that mindset was probably because I realized how much that was lacking in my last relationship that I had gotten out of. My sense of self worth was really not in a great place. And I think the neglect that I felt from my partner at the time I didn't internalize that so much.
Mm.
And the idea of giving myself a compliment felt so uncomfortable. But I was lucky enough to actually meet somebody who is incredibly vocal, incredibly complimentary to me, and realize how uncomfortable it made me feel. And then once I got over the discomfort, how amazing it made me feel. So I said, this is something I need to learn how to be able to do to myself to make sure that I'm getting that sense of empowerment and that or that sense of self worth. And it's not coming from an external source. I need to be able to acknowledge that in myself. And that's
Exactly.
the most challenging one on the list.
I
100%.
bet. I bet. What is there one that is a reoccurring one that you're like, I have to say this to myself?
I think I have a little mantra, I guess, which is something that I've taken from like my yoga days, which is very kind of high level, but it just helps to ground me, which is I am strong, I am beautiful, and I'm worthy. And it's
Strong,
simple,
I'm beautiful, I'm worthy. That's
but it
so
just hits on all
beautiful.
those things,
So
and really
great.
helps me to acknowledge that within myself. Yeah.
Everyone, you should say that at home. I am strong. I am beautiful. I am worthy. That's such an empowering thing to say to yourself. And if you said it every day, just think of all the things you can really get done in that day, right? So I know that relationship is one thing that was a stressor, but what are also some other stressors that you had, maybe from even starting back in college when you were a international student, so to speak, even though it's Canada, right? There's a lot of differences.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of my stressors that came with Canada and came with school, I've always been an adventurous person. And you know this about me, and I love to travel and I love to have new experiences. But I think in a lot of ways, up until that point, I was living my life in some ways for other people to say, look what I can do. Look how extreme I can be. Look how far and unconventional I can take this. And in Canada, I realized during college, like, no one really cares. You're living your life for yourself. And I was the first time I lived in a city as well. And cities can be really eye-opening, but they can also be really isolating. So I think one of my stressors there probably was figuring out how to be social where I didn't have these built-in networks and figuring out, okay, outside of everybody else's gaze, who are the people I want to surround myself with and who are the people that make me happy? And that's easier said than done. So there were some lonely moments. And I think having moved around a lot and having picked up and just restarted lives in all these different cities, that's something that can be difficult because being with friends, being with people that get you, and finding your tribe is such an important way to just unwind and feel that authentic human connection. But people don't really talk about how difficult that can be sometimes moving around. So that was something that definitely moving to a foreign country and being thrown in an area that was out of my element brought up. And not to mention something that, kind of rebuilding your life during a period of social distancing and stay at home orders. I mean,
Right.
that's a doozy.
Oh,
So,
totally.
yeah. But
That
I'm
that
so
is a
grateful
doozy.
for the internet and the wonders of digital connection because of that. And it's great to be able to lean on it.
Word. What I think has been the most challenging for me is that I can't go and visit people because I love to travel so much. And going on a hike with you last year in beautiful Boulder was just, even if it's a light hike, you're just out in nature 24/7. So, my question to you is, during those closures, how are you able to figure out new ways to fill your soul at home?
It's funny that you say that. The first thing my mind went to was, you said travel. And just like you, love to travel, love to go places. All I wanted to do was visit all of my girlfriends and just have this kind of female empowerment, reconnect, newly single affirming moments. But I couldn't. And I couldn't do that ethically and responsibly and safely. And I wanted that adventure. I wanted that fun stuff that comes with travel. To address the girlfriends thing, Zoom calls, we had different happy hour, like themes. We had quarantini themed happy hour to make cocktails and talk about different things. And I think everyone got some Zoom fatigue pretty early on for sure. But the other thing that was really fun was having travel night. So I had travel nights. My neighbors were in my quarantine pod, and we had travel nights where so for example, one of them we went to Japan and we decided to roll homemade sushi and just try something completely new for the first time. So we made homemade sushi, we made sake cocktails, we talked about like Japan, we watched a travel show, and we had an absolute blast. I did something similar with the person I'm dating, and we put on bathing suits in my living room, put Planet Earth on a deep sea, and literally put on like Bob Marley and just pretended we were at a beach resort because we can't get on the beach anywhere.
I love that though. Bring the beach to you.
Wow. Oh my gosh. It was an absolute joy. I was like, if people can see us in our living room right now, this must look ridiculous, but I don't care because it is bringing me so much joy right now.
I mean, that's a great idea. That's something I'll probably use this winter. For sure.
Every holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. Imaginary holiday. Bring it to you. Bring the warmth to you.
Turn up the thermostat.
With travel though, what was probably your favorite adventure that you've been on so many of them? I know. Choose one, or maybe just like a part of that trip that really stuck out to you.
Yeah, I think what's so funny about travel is when you're there, it's really hard to not have an expectation of what something's going to be. And so often your expectation falls short. And, you are there and there's stressors, there's transport and getting around, people get lost. How do you access your cell phone, when you're in a foreign country? The currency exchanges, like you forget to have cash on you, and then you realize like don't take card anywhere. All these stressors and all these things that when you're in the moment, you're so wrapped up in. But then when you take a step back and you look at what you did, you're like, holy, I did some really cool stuff. And I think one of those examples would be on New Year's Eve. Oh my God, it would have been probably 2012. I was living in Australia at the time and really made it my mission to go and see as much of the country as I could. And I think it did a pretty dang good job.
Yeah, you did.
It was New Year's Eve, and I really wanted to go to this beach that has been written up as like one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. It's made like the voters lists and everything.
What beach?
And it's in Esperance in Western Australia. So it's the southwestern tip of Australia. And it's actually in the Indian Ocean. And it's this white sand beach. It is in a state park. And there's a campground there, but there's only about 50 people allowed in the campground. And then you have access to thousands of acres, and there's nobody there. So you're completely spread out. There's kangaroos that live on the beach there. There is beautiful clear water and coral. There are manta rays, there are sharks, there's everything you can imagine. And I ended up going there after really stressful, not sure if there was going to be room in the campground or not. And at the time, I was a little stressed out because it was really hot during the day and really cold at night. And I actually fell asleep before New Year's. I was on the beach looking at these kangaroos, being like, this is great, but I kind of want to be with more people. And I'm so tired and dehydrated that I don't even feel like drinking champagne. Fell asleep 11 o'clock. Was totally kicking myself. And who cares? Looking back at that weekend and that time I spent there and that unique experience I had is something I will hold with me forever. I think it was a good lesson of next time I have those experiences, I'm going to make sure I'm living in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. The good thing is you remember it and that you can take that with you now every day of your life. So this kind of reminds me of like a sliding door moment in your life where you picked up and you went somewhere. You went to Australia and then you go and have a completely different life. So I want to ask you, have you experienced any other sliding door moments in your life where one decision led you to a completely different life?
Yeah, there's so many of them. It's so funny when you think back to that kind of set of decisions and what
Mm.
could have maybe been, and the doors you open and the other doors that you close as a result. But I would say, I think the biggest, one of the decisions that had the biggest impact in my life was after college, not going the, okay, I'm going to get a 9 to 5. I'm going to move to a comfortable city in the Northeast, to Boston, New York, where my high school and my college network is. I'm from the East Coast, and just and do the thing. I said, you know what? My college degree isn't going anywhere. It's under my belt. This is my time. I did the responsible thing. I've been the type A responsible person my whole life. Now's the time to do some cool shit. I
Mhm.
was allowed to say that. It
You
was
can
done.
say whatever you want to say. This is a stress-free zone.
So I said, let's do it. And I worked for a year, basically doing seasonal jobs that got me closer to nature, which I realized just how much I loved doing. And I was really inspired by actually a crew leader that I'd had. I'd worked in a conservation crew in Vermont before my last year of university, and she had done something similar. And I just looked up to her so much and realized you can have these amazing experiences and still live a relatively stable life and be an accomplished person. So she really kicked my butt into gear and made me realize the possibilities of what life can give you. And after college, I worked first for a summer in DC doing the career route thing, decided, no, I'm going to bite the bullet. And then I moved to Oregon and I worked as a trail crew leader for a youth conservation corps, helping to lead youth trail crews, building hiking trails and doing conservation and wilderness restoration in the wilderness areas all around Oregon,
Wow,
which was amazing.
that's
And
incredible. Yeah.
I not only did that open my eyes to what I could do with my life, but it opened my eyes to so many other people, the other ways that people live life. Most of the folks in my trail crew were risk youth that, had a hard time of it and had some pretty rough and tumble upbringing. And the conversations that I had were so eye opening. And again, really reinforced just how much privilege I had grown up with. And I really haven't looked at life the same since. So that experience was amazing. That winter, I decided to be a ski bum and go to the mountain, take advantage of my Canadian visa. And I moved to Whistler, just outside of Vancouver, and was a ski bum there. And that's where I met my ex partner, who eventually helped lead me towards Australia, which is where I lived for a while.
Yeah.
that decision after college to just not follow the conventional path really made a huge impact in my life, both in how I live and how I view the world by being exposed to these new types of people.
Totally. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel in general, you're the type of person that will plan things out, not to a T, but you've got your ducks in a row. So the fact that you did that for yourself and jumped outside of the box, that's really remarkable.
Oh my
So
gosh. Family
I,
thing is crazy.
wow,
My family thought I was crazy. And even to this day, looking back on it, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I have a full-time job. Like we've said, I'm in a great place in life.
fabulous,
My
Blake.
dad said, my dad said, if it was somebody else, even if maybe it was one of your sisters, I probably would have told them, maybe just get a job after college, maybe just but he said it was you. And you have exactly had everything planned to a T since you were a tiny girl. And he said, I had no doubt that you were doing what you needed to do for a reason and that you were going to make it work. So it was great to hear that in retrospect. I also said, okay, dad, that's easy to say now because I'm not like living on a commune, like God knows where. I'm working a professional job. But it was heartening to hear that. And I did that kind of thing because I had my reasons, and being financially independent was also really important to me. So I made sure that as I was moving, I was working to finance travel. And yeah, and I was really lucky to have the kind of support of family who maybe initially thought I was crazy or my actions were really out of character.
You were a responsible, crazy person.
And I
And
like
you
to
had
say
a job.
I'm a pragmatic hippie or a
There you go.
responsible idealist.
Yes.
And there are those people that are like out there on the front lines or like living completely, off the chart lives. And relatively on a straight and narrow, but that doesn't mean that I always have to go on the subscribe path.
I'll never forget the time that I walked into your house and I saw a big box and it had worms in it because went to open the trash bin and then I saw, I was like, well, what is this? Why are there worms? Why is there dirt? I don't know what to think of this. Am I doing something wrong? And then you, with just so much light, goes, oh, that's for composting. I was like, oh, composting.
Just like worms.
They're just your worms. And it fascinated me. And so that was the moment I was like, maybe I should recycle more like that. And that was I need to take ownership of, I need to do something better for sustainable living. So my last big question for you tonight is like, how do you maintain these sustainable practices and what do you usually recommend to people that are new, like myself, to starting practices in their health?
Yeah, and that's such a good question. I feel, especially when it comes to sustainability and just living a less impactful life and a more environmentally conscious life, that perfection is the enemy of the good. People will say, there's so many issues. The fish are going to choke on the plastic, and my car is an old gas guzzling sink, and I don't even know all of what goes in what bin for recycling, and it's all too overwhelming. And I can't be perfect, and I'm just going to put my head in the sand and not think about any of these issues. And that's a completely understandable reaction because there's so much information and people just don't know where to start. So I always say, think about the one topic that you're passionate about. So is that topic plastic waste? Is that topic global warming and climate change? Is that topic saving our rainforests and animal conservation? And then from there, just zooming in on one topic, and it is hard because there's so much to think about and so many things that
Right.
are kind of going wrong in the world. But from that topic, deciding what is the first thing that you can do. So that might mean recycling and maybe paying $10 a month if you don't have local compost collection service for private collection for compost. They offer that in almost all major cities now. There's all sorts of people, urban farms that are using that food waste as compost.
You
So
work,
maybe
you worked at an urban farm, right?
I did
In
in
Chicago? Yeah.
I did. Yeah, I
Mm.
worked for Growing Home, which is in the South. And I wish I used to have a Rolodex of names in my head for Chicago resources. There's so many local farms there that have compost pickup and will then use that for soil for their farm. So, that's one thing. Deciding that you're going to take public transport more, that you're going to ride your bike more. That's another. And I really believe that it's up to governments and companies in a very big way to make the giant changes that are necessary to steer our planet in the right direction. But I think that interest that comes and that passion that can come from just altering your ways of living in a small way, maybe it doesn't move the needle in a planetary sense, but it moves the consciousness. And when our consciousness starts to be shifted and we start to have these conversations with our friends and people observe the worms in our compost in our kitchen, then those conversations are starting. People start to pay and purchase more sustainably and live more sustainable lives. And that pressure translates into political pressure and into pressure for companies and corporations. Millennials have buying power, millennials have a political voice. And so I think it's up to our generation to have those conversations. And when we change our actions even a little bit, the world's forced to respond.
I'm curious, where do you see the world in 5 years, regardless of the political climate, from what you've seen just even in the last year that has already changed? What do you see? What do you think? What kind of strides are companies going to possibly make?
I think it's funny because a lot of these conversations are not quite yet penetrating like the main news media, but the absolute sea change that has happened and the corporate level when it comes to sustainability commitments and environmental commitments has been insane. And I am an incredibly cynical person. A lot of people know that about me. If you have an idea and want holes picked in it, you come to me. So for me to say that means something. And I feel really optimistic. I think that companies understand what needs to change. They understand that if we have climate change and if we have natural disasters, that can impact their business negatively. So they're making strides and committing to net zero emissions by 2050, committing to zero waste to landfill by 2030, making these big commitments that are actually relatively short time scales. And once a big company makes it, then the scales tip and all of their competitors have to do the same thing. So we are just seeing a landslide of corporate sustainability commitments. And I think the next 5 years are going to be really bright in terms of what people are doing, moving to renewable energy, moving away from oil, all these things that just are so logical, but the impetus hasn't quite been there. I think that momentum is going and it's going to continue. So I think it's
Okay.
good.
Going in the right direction. Wonderful. Oh, this was such a pleasure talking to you. And don't always get to have conversations with friends like this. And we're just getting to dig deeper. And once again, I'm just so thankful, Maya, that you came on today and shared your views and your stressors and got vulnerable. Really means a lot.
And thanks for having me, Sarah. It means a lot to be a person.
Of course. And if there's anything you'd like to share with the viewers and the listeners, I giving it to you, right?
Yeah, I would just say, building on your last question, uh, when it comes to sustainability, which is my absolute passion, take it one step at a time. And when it comes to self care, don't self care should be an item on your to do list. If you are someone like me, is has lists up the wazoo, it needs to be an item on your to do list, and it needs to be towards the top of that to do list because you can't live a full life. To your point, you're so often engaged in by stress. So you need to make sure that you're bringing your best self to everything you do and taking care of yourself first and foremost.
Thank you so much, Maya. All right, guys, we will have another fun conversation next week. So join me, Stress Free Solutions with Sarah, and have a wonderful evening. Take care. Be kind to everyone.